The vast Wyoming plains stretched out like an endless canvas of faded browns and grays, where the wind whispered secrets to no one in particular. Amos Granger, a man whose 52 years had etched deep lines into his sun-baked skin, stood at the edge of what he intended to be his final resting place. The shovel in his hands felt heavier than usual, not from the weight of the tool itself, but from the burden of the decision it represented. He had chosen this spot behind the old barn, where the ground was soft enough to dig but far enough from the house to avoid disturbing the ghosts he imagined lingered there. The barn, with its peeling red paint and sagging roof, had once been a hub of activity back when his father ran the ranch with a firm hand and a hopeful heart. Now, it was just another relic of a life that had slipped away, piece by piece. Amos paused, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, casting long shadows that danced across the uneven earth. He had woken that morning with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. No more waiting for death to creep up unannounced. He digged the grave himself, mark it with a simple stone, and when the time came, whether from the bottle of whiskey he kept hidden in the pantry or the isolation that gnawed at his soul, he'd handle it on his terms. No funeral, no mourners, just him and the dirt. It seemed fitting for a man who had outlived his wife, his dreams, and any semblance of connection to the world beyond his fences. As he thrust the shovel into the ground again, the blade biting into the soil with a satisfying thud, memories flooded back unbidden. His wife, Eleanor, had been the light in this desolate place. They'd married young, full of plans for a family that never materialized. Miscarriages had stolen their hopes, one after another, until Eleanor's spirit broke under the weight. She left him on a rainy Tuesday, packing her bags and driving off without a backward glance. That was 20 years ago. Since then, Amos had let the ranch fall into disrepair. The cattle herd dwindled from hundreds to a mere dozen, grazing lazily on the sparse grass. He rarely ventured into town, preferring the solitude that had become his armor. The hole deepened slowly, each scoop of earth a testament to his resolve. He worked methodically, his broad shoulders straining against the faded flannel shirt. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. Amos glanced at the sky, noting the gathering clouds on the horizon. A storm was brewing, the kind that could turn the plains into a muddy quagmire overnight. He quickened his pace, determined to finish before the weather turned foul. The grave didn't need to be perfected, just deep enough to keep the coyotes at bay. By late afternoon, the pit was about 4 feet deep, wide enough for his lanky frame. Amos leaned on the shovel, breathing heavily, his heart pounding not just from exertion but from the finality of it all. He imagined lying there, the earth cool against his skin, the stars wheeling overhead one last time. It was almost poetic, in a grim sort of way. He straightened up, tossing the shovel aside, and trudged back toward the house for a drink. The ranch house itself was a squat, one-story affair, built by his grandfather in the early 1900s. Its wooden siding was warped from years of harsh winters, and the porch creaked under his boots as he ascended the steps. Inside, the air was staled, thick with the smell of dust and neglect. Amos poured himself a generous measure of whiskey, the amber liquid gliding in the dim light filtering through grimy windows. He sank into his armchair, the springs protesting loudly, and took a long sip. The burn down his throat was familiar, a companion in his loneliness. He closed his eyes, letting the alcohol dull the edges of his thoughts. But peace eluded him. Instead, he saw Eleanor's face, young and smiling, before the losses hardened her. He saw his father's stern gaze, disappointed in the son who couldn't keep the ranch thriving. And he saw himself, a boy full of wonder, chasing fireflies across these same fields. A distant trumble of thunder pulled him from his reverie. Amos set the glass down and stood, intending to secure the barn doors before the storm hit. As he stepped outside, the wind whipped his hat off his head, sending it tumbling across the yard. He chased it half-heartedly, cursing under his breath. That's when he heard a faint cry, carried on the gusts. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks, or perhaps a wounded animal. But it came again, clearer this time, a human voice, weak and pleading. Amos froze, his eyes scanning the horizon. The gate to his property, a rusted iron affair half a mile down the dirt road, was barely visible in the fading light. But there, Slumped against one of the posts was a figure, a person. His heart skipped a beat. No one came this way. The ranch was miles from the nearest highway, forgotten by all but the tax collector. Cautiously, he approached, his boots crunching on the gravel path. As he drew nearer, the figure resolved into a young woman, her clothes torn and muddied, her face pale and streaked with dirt. She was pregnant, that much was obvious. Her belly swelled prominently under a threadbare coat, and she clutched it protectively as another cry escaped her lips. "Help! Please!" Her voice was barely a whisper, lost almost immediately in the wind. She collapsed fully then, her body going limp against the gate. Amos hesitated, his mind racing. Who was she? How had she gotten here? Part of him wanted to turn back, to pretend he hadn't seen her. Intruders meant complications, and complications were the last thing he needed. But as the first raindrops began to fall, fat and cold, he couldn't ignore the humanity in her plea. With a grunt, he knelt beside her, his knees protesting the movement. She was light as a feather when he lifted her, her head lolling against his shoulder. Her skin was clammy, feverish perhaps, and her breathing shallow. Carrying her back to the house felt like an eternity. The rain intensified, soaking them both by the time he kicked open the door and laid her on the couch. The old piece of furniture, covered in a faded quilt, sagged under her weight. Amos stood back, water dripping from his clothes, unsure what to do next. He wasn't equipped for this. No medical supplies beyond a dusty first aid kit, no phone since he'd let the line go dead years ago. The nearest neighbor was 20 miles away, and with the storm raging, the roads would be impassable. The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were a deep brown, filled with fear and exhaustion. "Where am I?" she murmured, trying to sit up but wincing in pain. "You're at my ranch," Amos replied gruffly, his voice rusty from disuse. "Found you at the gate." "What's your name?" "Leela," she said, her hand instinctively going to her belly. "Leela Harper." I didn't mean to trespass. I was walking, and I got lost." "The baby." Amos nodded curtly. "Rest, I'll get you some water." He moved to the kitchen, filling a glass from the tap. The water was well drawn, clean but metallic tasting. When he returned, she drank greedily, spilling some down her chin. "Thank you," she whispered, handing the glass back. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the sparse furnishings, a rickety table, a few chairs, shelves lined with canned goods and old books. "You live here alone?" "Yeah," Amos said, not offering more. He busied himself lighting a fire in the hearth, the wood crackling as flames took hold. The warmth spread slowly, chasing the chill from the air. Outside, the storm howled, rain lashing the windows like angry fists. Leela shifted on the couch, her face contorting in discomfort. "I think something's wrong. The pain started hours ago. I was hitchhiking, trying to get to Casper, but no one stopped. I walked off the road, and then, I don't remember." Amos's stomach knotted. Pains? With her pregnancy so advanced, that could mean labor, or worse. He had no experience with births. Eleanor's miscarriages had been handled by doctors in town, leaving him helpless on the sidelines. "How far along are you?" 8 months, Leela replied, her voice trembling. "It's too early. Please, I need a doctor." The rancher glanced out the window. The rain was a torrent now, visibility zero. "Can't drive in this. Roads'll be flooded. We'll wait it out till morning." Tears welled in her eyes. "I can't. It hurts so much." Amos rummaged through his cabinets, finding an old bottle of aspirin. "Take these. Might help." He handed her 2 pills and another glass of water. She swallowed them obediently, leaning back with a sigh. As the night wore on, the storm showed no signs of abating. Amos paced the room, occasionally stoking the fire. Leela dozed fitfully, moaning in her sleep. He watched her, this unexpected intruder, and wondered about her story. She looked too young to be in such a predicament, her features delicate, her hair a tangled mess of auburn curls. What had driven her to this remote place? Running from something, no doubt. People didn't end up at his gate by accident. Around midnight, Leela woke with a sharp cry, clutching her abdomen. "It's coming. The baby." Oh God! Amos's pulse raced. He had to act. Recalling vague instructions from books he'd read in his youth, he boiled water on the stove, gathered clean towels from the linen closet, and washed his hands thoroughly. "Breathe," he told her, his voice steadier than he felt. In and out. Slow. Leela nodded, sweat beading on her forehead. The contractions came in waves, each one bringing a gasp from her lips. Amos positioned himself at her side, offering what comfort he could. Hours blurred into a haze of pain and effort. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. Finally, as dawn broke and the rain eased to a drizzle, a cry pierced the air, not Leela's, but a tiny, indignant wail. The baby, a girl, slippery and red-faced, emerged into Amos's trembling hands. He wrapped her in a towel, clearing her airways with gentle pats. Leela, exhausted but alive, reached for her child with tears streaming down her face. "She's here," Amos said, his voice choked with emotion he hadn't expected. "You did it." Leela held the infant close, murmuring soft words. "Thank you. I couldn't have without you." Amos stepped back, the gravity of the moment sinking in. The grave he'd dug waited empty outside, a symbol of the death he'd courted. But now, life had intruded, raw and demanding. As the sun rose over the sodden plains, casting golden light through the windows, he felt a spark of something long dormant, a purpose, perhaps, or hope. The morning after the storm brought a crisp clarity to the air, the kind that follows nature's fury. Amos stood on the porch, surveying the damage. Puddles dotted the yard like mirrors, reflecting the blue sky above. The barn had held up, but the section of fence had toppled, and the road to town was a muddy ribbon. Inside, Leela and the baby slept, their breathing synchronized in peaceful rhythm. He had named the child nothing yet that was Leela's right, but in his mind, he called her Dawn, for the light she brought. He set about chores with renewed vigor, milking the cows and feeding the chickens. The routine, once a drudgery, new felt grounding. By noon, Leela was awake, nursing the baby with a mix of awe and tenderness. "I need to tell you why I'm here," she said, her voice stronger. Amos pulled up a chair, listening as she unfolded her tale. She was 19, from a small town in Nebraska. Her fiancé tilde copyright, a man named Trent, had seemed charming at first, but jealousy and alcohol turned him violent. When she discovered the pregnancy, he accused her of trapping him, and the beatings escalated. Fearing for her life and the unborn child's, she fled, hitching rides west with no clear destination. "I just wanted to disappear," she confessed. "Start over somewhere he couldn't find me." Amos nodded, his jaw set. He'd known men like Trent, bullies who preyed on the vulnerable. "You're safe here," he said, "for now." But safety was relative. The ranch was isolated, but word could travel, and Leela needed proper medical care, supplies for the baby. As the day progressed, Amos hitched the old truck and drove into town, the tires sloshing through mud. The general store owner, Old Man Hargrove, raised an eyebrow at the list. "Diapers, formula, blankets." "Got company, Amos?" "First time you've bought more than whiskey in years." "Just helping a traveler," Amos muttered, paying in cash. Back at the ranch, he helped Leela settle in. The spare room, dusty from disuse, became a nursery of sorts. He cleaned it top to bottom, airing out the mattress and hanging curtains Eleanor had sewn long ago. Leela watched from the doorway, the baby in her arms. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me." Amos shrugged. "Reckon I was digging my own grave yesterday." "Literally." "Figured it was time to bury something else instead of my past." "Maybe." Leela's eyes widened. "A grave? For yourself?" "Yeah. Thought I was done with living. Then you showed up." She smiled faintly. "Fate's funny that way." Days turned into a week, the rhythm of the ranch adapting to its new inhabitants. Amos taught Leela how to tend the garden, sparse as it was, and she in turn brought life to the house, cooking meals that filled the air with savory scents, singing lullabies that echoed through the rooms. The baby, named Rose after Leela's grandmother, thrived, her cries a soundtrack to their days. But shadows lingered. One evening, as they sat by the fire, a knock echoed at the door. Amos froze. Visitors were rare. He opened it cautiously, revealing a sheriff's deputy, hat in hand. "Evening, Amos." "Heard rumors of a young woman here." "Runaway, maybe?" Leela paled, clutching Rose. Amos stepped forward. "She's my niece, visiting." "Family business." The deputy eyed him skeptically but nodded. "All right, just checking." Storm brought all sorts out. As the door closed, Leela whispered, he'll come looking. Trent, he's got connections. Amos's resolve hardened. Let him try. This is my land. The threat hung over them like the storm clouds of before. Amos began repairing the fences, fortifying the gate. He dusted off his old rifle, loading it just in case. Leela shared more details. Said Trent's last name, Dawson. His job as a mechanic in Omaha. His temper that flared like wildfire. One night, as Rose slept and the stars blanketed the sky, Amos and Leela talked deep into the hours. He shared his own pains and the loss of Eleanor, the failed dreams. I built walls so high, I forgot how to let anyone in, he admitted. Leela reached for his hand. Maybe it's time to tear them down. Their bond grew, tentative at first, then stronger. Amos found himself laughing at Rose's antics, her tiny fists waving in delight. Leela's presence healed wounds he hadn't acknowledged. But danger loomed. A letter arrived, forwarded from Tona Anonymous, but threatening. I know where you are, Leela. Coming for what's mine. Panic set in. Amos devised a plan that had north to Montana, where he had distant cousins. But as they prepared, a truck roared up the drive one dusk. Trent, burly and dread-faced, stepped out, a shotgun in hand. Leela, get out here. Amos met him at the gate, rifle ready. Leave now. Trent sneered. That's my woman, my kid. Hand him over. The confrontation escalated, words turning to shoves. Leela emerged, Rose crying in her arms. Go away, Trent. It's over. Enraged, Trent lunged. Amos fired a warning shot into the air. Next one's for you. Sirens wailed in the distance. He had the deputy, alerted by a neighbor's call. Trent fled, tires spinning. But the incident shook them. In the aftermath, as authorities took statements, Amos realized this was no longer just his solitary life. He had a family to protect, however unconventional. Weeks passed without incident, but vigilance remained. The grave behind the barn, now filled in, grew over with wildflowers. Amos planted a tree there, a symbol of new beginnings. Leela and Rose became fixtures, their laughter banishing the silence. And Amos, the loner rancher, discovered that sometimes, life collapses at your gate not to end you, but to save you.